Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our final chapter of Daniel. As I've said more than once, this is the final chapter, but this is not the end of the class. We still have a lot to talk about, and we're following. This is the final chapter where it's the end of a kind of a prophecy, the last one, which is from chapters 10 to 12, Yud to Yud Bet, and it's kind of a where, for the first time, we kind of really see this transition to a miraculous future that allows certainly from an academic approach to place this this prophecy to before the decrees are over, before everything is settled. Let's kind of jump in, and if you just to remind you, so in the last chapter we really had kind of a play-by-play of relations between the Ptolemies, the Seleucids, then what the Seleucids were doing in the area, until we get to the point where it all kind of breaks down. And all of a sudden, Antiochus Epiphanes, Antiochus IV, is portrayed as a super successful, villainous king who's going to take over the entire area until he falls. Okay, so let's take a look at the actual text. And here we are. And just to remind you, so let's go back to the end of chapter 11, Perek Yud Aleph. You can all see the text on your screens, correct? Great. Okay. All right. So here we have the very end of the chapter, and he's going to come into the Eretz Hatzvi, the beauteous land. And before and just to remind you, before we get to this, V'rabot yikashelu, and many will fail, and then there are going to be nations that actually escape. The land of Egypt will not escape. He's going to be able to conquer all the treasures of Egypt. And this part we know is absolutely not historical at all, right? And then, but then at the end, right, he's going to come to an end. We don't really understand how. To be no, right? He's going to plant the tents of his palace between the seas and Lahar Tzvi Kodesh, and the beautiful mountain, of course, being the Temple Mount. Uva ad kitzo ve'en ozer lo, and he comes to his end, and he will then not have no allies. No one will help him. Now, I'm just going to remind you that before we get to that point, there's actually a description of what's going on among the Jews, right? Where you have maskilei am, those people who are wise and knowledgeable among the people. I'm reading now from verse 33, pasuk lamed gimel. Umaskilei am yavinu l'rabim, right? And the wise of the people will essentially teach the many. Right? And they will fail, they will stumble through sword and flame in captivity and in spoil for days, one assumes for many days. And when they stumble, when they fail, they will have a little help. And they're going to be kind of sneaky people who are not sincere, and many insincere people will kind of attach themselves to them. All right, and then it goes on. And from these wise, these teachers, they will stumble to purify them, right? To make them, to whiten them. In other words, it's talking in languages of like when you purify silver, etc., to get rid of the impurities. There's this idea that that's what happens when kind of a righteous group fails, that they need to be purified, and the way they're purified is by losing some people, right? And that's what it seems to be talking about, right? Ki od lamoed, because there's still time until the appointed time when this ends. All right, so that's a description of what's going on during the time of Antiochus' decrees. It actually matches a lot in terms of the way Second Maccabees describes these martyrs, right? People who are holding fast to the laws of their fathers and die, right? Of course, the way Second Maccabees describes it, it's very, very kind of, I wouldn't say, it's kind of fanciful, it's very dramatic. Like it's giving accounts which are kind of dramatized accounts of martyrdom. And in First Maccabees, martyrdom is not a particular value. In fact, in First Maccabees, you have that law that you can go to war on Shabbat in a defense if you're in that, if you must, because they have a group of people who are attacked on Shabbat. They, of course, because it's Shabbat, they will not take up arms, and they, of course, all die. And they say, from now on, we must fight on Shabbat to save our lives, because if we don't, we have lost this war. They will simply always attack us on Shabbat, and we will all die, right? Second Maccabees, on the other hand, talks a lot about martyrdom. There's one guy who keeps on trying to be a martyr, and he has successive failures until he finally succeeds by jumping off a cliff. And so you have this kind of very, very unusual emphasis on martyrdom in Second Maccabees, but and then there are theories about why that is. But certainly here we're also seeing this idea of not necessarily martyrs, but people who are being killed, and they're the best. They're the best people. They're the wise people. They're the people who are teaching, and they have a little bit of help, but not enough. We're not talking here about the fighting Maccabees. We're talking about the people who are teaching and who are fighting this kind of spiritual, but completely on a spiritual level. And we don't know what's going on exactly. So let's continue to chapter 12, Parak Yud Bet. And again, just to remind you, so now we're in the so it's all of a sudden, so Antiochus IV, he's super successful. He conquered Egypt, and now and he sets his tents, and that's when the end comes, and he's going to fail. What's going to happen? And now we're going to get into a complete different thing than we've seen before. So I'm reading. And at that time, Michael, the great prince, remember we have this idea that Michael is the prince of Israel. He is the angel who's on our side, who fights for us, right? Who stands over the people of your nation. Because remember, this is being told to Daniel. So Daniel is hearing the people of your nation, Daniel. And there's going to be a time of such trouble. They won't have seen trouble like this since they were a nation, right? Essentially, since they left Egypt. And at that time, your people will escape, will be delivered. Anyone who is written in the book, right? So there are two ways to read this, right? So you could say it's anyone who's written in the book to be able to be saved, or you can just say this whole thing is written in the book, right? This whole thing is prophesied. But it certainly the simplest way to read this is anyone who is written in the book to be saved will be saved. Okay. Now here we already see this kind of idea that the righteous will be saved, of course, and the wicked won't. And here we get to the resurrection part, okay? And many of those who sleep in the dirt will wake. Right? Some to eternal life, and some to kind of reproaches and shaming, and to eternal shame. So you're going to have, everyone's going to be resurrected. You're going to have the righteous, they're going to be resurrected to eternal life. You're going to have the wicked who are resurrected for shame. Are they being resurrected in actual bodies? Honestly, to me, this actually sounds like resurrection to physical bodies. You could read it. I think it's very hard to read it as metaphorical. In this case, we're going to look at Yechezkel just to compare it, right? It's very hard to read this as metaphorical. It's also hard, at least for me, to read it as they're going to be resurrected in heaven. Like, that doesn't seem to be what's going on. These are people who are sleeping in the dirt, and now they're going to wake. Where are they going to wake? They're going to sit up, and they're going to wake. They're going to be alive again. I see a question. Yes, Joel?
This verse, I hear, my last name is Moses. People who are, like, I had a workman in actually last week into my apartment. He was Seventh-day Adventist. And when they often, like, people who belong to conservative churches, they hear my last name, it's like automatically they start talking about the Bible. He started talking about Daniel, seriously, of all books. And he didn't quote this verse, but I noticed that conservative, like evangelicals often quote this verse, about proof that in the quote unquote Old Testament, there is a view of the afterlife. This verse especially.
Well,
He was going on about everything we're talking about. He was going on, about Daniel and prophecies for what's going to happen very shortly on the final.
right. So Daniel is actually the first time we really see, and this is the whole thing where in terms of it going along with thought in the Second Temple period, not that everyone in the Second Temple period believed in resurrection. So for example, Ben Sira certainly doesn't. Ben Sira talks about it as like, you go, you die, and that's it, right? We'll look in just a second, in just a moment. Actually, maybe we'll look now. Let's talk now, because this is where we see it. I'm going to read one more verse, and we'll talk more about resurrection let's compare it to like Yechezkel Lamed Zayin, Ezekiel 37, where we see that it is metaphorical, and then compare it to some other works from the Second Temple period, not Ben Sira again, because Ben Sira, so for example, Ben Sira, Ptolemaic period, no. Resurrection, no. Second Maccabees shows that there's an argument about it. So let's take a look. We have a little bit of time to do this because it's a short chapter. So let's take a look. So let's read one more verse. V'mazkilim yazhiru kizohar harakia. And those people who are wise, who are teachers, they're going to shine at like the shining of the sky. They're going to shine probably like stars, right? Umatzdikei harabim kakochavim lolam ve'ed. And those who make the many righteous by teaching them, right? Like stars forever. Now, it doesn't say they're going to be stars. There's this idea in Greek and Roman circles that people can become stars. It doesn't say they're like stars. They're going to shine like stars. There is this idea then, so are they going to be in heaven? Is that the eternal life that they're promised? Is it, what is going on? What's exactly the resurrection? So that is a question here. It sounds, on the one hand, it sounds like they have a physical resurrection. They're going to wake up, right? At the same time, the wise and the educators are going to shine like stars in the heavens. But maybe it means they're going to shine like angels. Maybe that means they're going to be raised up in terms of a spiritual level. One of the things, so when people are looking for proof of belief in resurrection, like for example, the Dead Sea Scrolls, so a lot of times it'll point to Hodayot. Hodayot says, thank you, God, for raising me up from as one sleeping with worms to be with the angels. And the problem is, of course, is that the person who's writing it is not dead, right? He's not talking about resurrection after death. He's talking about somehow metaphysically, God has raised him to be with the angels, quote unquote, while he's still alive. So we do see this idea that you can kind of be with the angels and consider yourself on a level with the angels, even though you're walking around on earth, right? So let's take a look at this. We'll take a brief look at Yechezkel, and then we'll look at some things that from the Second Temple period that do seem to be talking about resurrection. Now, Danny asks, he says, is this the only mention in terms of being written in the book? Is this the only mention in the Tanakh of the Yamim Hanor in the Tanakh of the concept of being written in the book? As far as I remember, Daniel is in fact the one place where you have people written in the book. I'm trying to remember now. There's I'll have to make sure, right? I mean, I need to make sure that I seem to think that there's one other place where people are written in a book, but I think Daniel is actually it. I think Daniel's actually it. What book exactly are they being written in? Good question. You don't know, right? It's a heavenly book. You have another place where he talks about that there's a heavenly book where things are recorded. That's the book, right? And again, I think I'm thinking of another place where there's a heavenly book where things are recorded, but I'm not sure. Maybe just Daniel. So let's go to our resurrection examples. Okay. So here, let's take a look at Yechezkel. So this is, of course, the dry bones. I'm not going to say here he says prophesied by these dry bones. They come back to life, right? And he says, therefore prophesy and say unto them, I'll just do the Hebrew. I will open your graves and bring you out of your graves, my nation, right? And I will bring you to the land of Israel. Say, oh, well, that's resurrection. That's a very clear resurrection. But if you just go back a verse and you see, Vayomer ben Adam, Hatzamot ele kol beit Yisrael hema, hine omrim, Yeshua's motenu, vavdatik vatenu, nigzarnu lanu. He said, listen, what are these bones? What do they symbolize? I'm going to tell you straight on. I'm not going to let you guess, right? They're the whole house of Israel because they're saying our bones are dry. Our hope is lost, right? We are, that's it. We're cut off, or it's been decided, like, that's it. We have no more hope. Our bones are dry. So you will tell them, your bones are dry. I will bring you out of your graves and bring you to the land of Israel, right? And it says, I will put my spirit in you and you will live, and I will put you on earth. So I will give you hope, right? I will bring you back to Israel, right? To the land of Israel. So, and then you will know that I am God. So it's not really talking, it's talking in the sense of God is going to give you back your hope and bring you back to the land, right? So if we compare it with our chapter here in Daniel, we have, it really says many who are sleeping in the earth will wake up, some to an eternal life, some to eternal eternal shame, right? Or terribleness, whatever. And so we have here a much more physical sense. Now, similarly to Yechezkel, we have this verse in Yeshayahu Chaf Vav, Isaiah 26. Let's see if I can find it. Here we are. So if we look at Pasuk Yotet, verse 19, right? Yichyu metecha nevelati yikumun hakitu v'rananu shochne afar kital orot talecha va'aretz rifa'im tapil. Your dead will live. My dead bodies will rise up, right? Awake and sing those who sleep on the earth. Now, probably this idea of awaking those who sleep on the earth is probably being referred to by Daniel, right? It's probably an intentional parallel here, right? Because the dew of the light is your dew, and the land brings the land will. It's not clear what this is. The land will fell ghosts, or in this sense, it will bring them to life. I don't know. But at any rate, you get the idea. But if you look at the context, again, it's talking about it's talking about the relationship of the nation and the relationship of the of them to, here you have here just as someone who is pregnant, she's coming close to giving birth, that's when she's crying out in pain, right? So are we, right? In other words, we're at the height of our pain, but that will somehow lead to a rebirth, right? And that's the idea here, right? And so you can read it. You can read it as a promise of resurrection, but it seems to be much more in contrast with, in Pasuk Yudalad in verse 14, this line that's saying that essentially the wicked, they die and that's it. You God are going to destroy them and they're going to be dead and that's it, right? As opposed to your your people, the people who kind of believe in you and follow you, they're going to have this kind of, they're going to rise and praise you because the dew of light is there too. Now you could absolutely get, you could read it as a resurrection, you can read it as a promise of resurrection for the righteous. It doesn't seem to be picked up again before the Second Temple period. So if we get to the second, so like again in Yechezkel, no, but if we look at pseudo Ezekiel, which is what the Dead Sea Scrolls does with Yechezkel. So here it's a little bit, it's hard because it's fragmentary. So you have to make a bunch of assumptions here, right? But it's not, but it's in there. It's like, it's a retelling of the dry bones, right? But it's in the context of Yechezkel saying, I've seen all these things. How will they be recompensed for their piety? All these people were dead, right? All these people, when are they going to be paid back for their kindness? And then he's like, prophesy over the bones and speak, right? And then he's like, and then he says, oh Lord, when shall these things come to be, right? So it's the here, this is a problem because it got a little bit messed up here. Hold on. Let's see. I'll fix this just a sec. There we go. So now you can read the Hebrew. It messes up the Hebrew the way that, yeah. So here it says, Hashem matayi ele. God, when will these things occur? Right? In other words, when is the resurrection actually going to happen? It's the resurrection here is put in the context of Ra'iti Rabim miYisrael asher avu et shimcha ve'alchu b'darkei parei libcha ve'ele matayu ve'chacha yishtamu chasdam. But Yechezkel says, I saw all these people who loved your name, they go in their way, when are they going to be repaid? And then he gets the dry bones prophecy. This is in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Then he gets the dry bones prophecy, right? And it's like, okay, this is what's going to happen in the Messianic age. This is how people are going to be repaid, right? So this is probably not sectarian. It's probably not specific to the Qumran sect, but this is something that people are writing in the Second Temple period. It's an absolute reinterpretation of the dry bones to be a promise of resurrection in the final days. So let's take another. Let's look at let's actually look at for a second at Second Maccabees, where we actually see. You know what? I'm going to bring.
Yes. Miriam.
Yes.
So does this thing have a name? It's called Pseudo Yechezkel.
Pseudo Ezekiel, and it's in a bunch of fragments. So you see, this is Pseudo Ezekiel A.
What's it called in Hebrew?
I assume Pseudo Yechezkel.
It's not Pesher Yechezkel.
It could be Yechezkel. How would they say it? Ido, do you know how you would say it in Hebrew? There's a way that they do it when they do your pseudo Ezekiel. That's Yechezkel whatever. I don't remember
we say pseudo Yechezkel many times.
You do say pseudo Yechezkel? There you go.
I don't know about Yechezkel. I know there are other parts. We say pseudo.
Yeah.
Pseudo?
That's how we say it many times. Yeah.
Pseudo is pseudo. Pseudo. So yeah. So if we take a look at here. We have an example. Just a second. Here we are. Here we have an example in First Maccabees. I hope this is open to the right place. Here we are, the Mountain of the Dead. Now, this is in the Book of the Watchers. The Book of the Watchers. Now, remember, First Enoch. This is in First Enoch. The Book of Enoch, or also called the Book of Enoch. There's a second Enoch. There's a third Enoch. But First Enoch, okay, is actually a collection, and I've said this more than once, of different works that all have, that their only connecting thread for all of them is that Enoch features in them, right? And they're from different periods, right? So this one, Book of the Watchers, is actually considered to be pretty early. So here we have Enoch traveling around, and again, this is the reason that there are a few reasons why Enoch is taken as the hero of these, but it says God took him and he wasn't, like, so the idea that Enoch was kind of walking around heaven and seeing stuff was a very appealing idea. What is in heaven? This is something that people in the Second Temple period in particular cared about, because they did have an idea of like there's a heaven with different things going on, right? Not just astronomy. Astronomy people have been interested in a very, very long time. And he said, I said, how smooth are these hollows and altogether deep and dark to view? Then Raphael answered me, one of the holy angels who was with me, and said to me, these hollow places are intended that the spirits and the souls of the dead might be gathered into them. For this very purpose, they were created, that here the souls of all human beings should be gathered. And look, these are the pits for the place of their confinement. Thus they were made until the day on which they will be judged, and until the time of the day of the end of the great judgment that will be exacted from them. There I saw the spirit of a dead man making suit, and his lamentation went up to heaven and cried and made suit. And he's talking about who is this? This is Abel, who Cain murdered. Da, 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 da. Okay. Then I asked about all the hollow places, why they were separated one from the other. And he answered me and said, these three were made that the spirits of the dead might be separated. This has been separated from the spirits of the righteous, where the bright fountain of water is. This has been created for the spirits of the sinners, when they die and are buried in the earth, and judgment has not been executed on them in their life. Here, their spirits are separated for this great torment until the great day of judgment, of scourges and tortures of the cursed forever, that there might be a recompense for their spirits. There he will bind them forever. Now, let me make this clear, okay? So you have the righteous go here, the wicked go there, right? The wicked who didn't get punished during their lifetimes, because we're looking around, they didn't get punished, right? When are they going to get punished? They're going to get punished at the end time. All right. Now, what's interesting here is we're not talking about heaven and hell so much. It's a little bit like that, but the real punishment and reward is going to be at the end of days. This is a holding cell for them, right? And resurrection is going to kind of cure it, right? Kind of not cure it. That's what everyone's waiting for. And this has been separated for the spirits of them that make suit, who make disclosure about the destruction when they were murdered in the days of the sinners. And this was created for the spirits of the people who will not be pious, but sinners, etc. And their spirits will not be punished on the day of judgment, nor will they be raised from there. So there are people who are, it seems like there are people who are in between, and they're not going to get punished on the day of judgment, but they're also not going to get out, right? They're not going to get resurrected. Right? So you have this kind of idea of everyone's in a holding cell waiting for the final judgment. That's when they get punished or rewarded. Okay. And this is an idea of First Enoch. Now I really want to bring, before the questions, I want to bring Second Maccabees. Okay. So just a moment. Now, as I said, Second Maccabees actually has a lot of belief in resurrection in it, particularly from, or at least from eternal life. So let's first look at this actually, because I don't want to lose this place. Okay, this is talk about Judah the Maccabee, right? Yehuda Maccabee, and we're talking about Second Maccabees. To remind you, Second Maccabees, written in Greek, condensed later, originally written to explain the celebration of the day of Nicanor, which is on Ta'anit Esther, so we have it coming up, right? And then repurposed and edited in Judea to explain Hanukkah. Okay. So here we have then Yehuda assembled his army and went to the city of Adullam. As the seventh day was coming on, they purified themselves according to the custom and kept the Sabbath there. On the next day, when the need for it had arisen, Yehuda's men went to recover the bodies of those fallen earlier and to bring them back to lie with their kindred in their ancestral sepulchres. Then under the tunic of each one of the dead, they found sacred tokens of the idols of Jamnia, which the law forbids the Judeans to wear. And it became clear to all that this was the reason these men had fallen. So they all blessed the ways of the Lord, the righteous judge, who makes visible the things that are hidden. And they turned to supplication, imploring that the sin that had been committed might be wholly blotted out. The noble Yehuda exhorted the people to keep themselves free from sin, for they had seen with their own eyes what had happened as the result of the sin of those who had fallen. He also took up a collection, man by man, to the amount of 2,000 drachmas of silver and sent it to Jerusalem to provide for a sin offering. In doing this, he acted very well and honorably, taking account of the resurrection. For if he were not expecting that those who had fallen would rise again, it would have been superfluous and foolish to pray for the dead. But if he was looking to the splendid reward that is laid up for those who fall asleep in godliness, it was a holy and pious thought. Therefore, he made atonement for the dead so that they might be delivered from their sin. Now, the truth is, honestly, there are lots of reasons why he would pray for some. You have these people fell in battle. Then you find out they've all got these little idols on them, right? Lots of reasons to pray, to send donations for sacrifice on their behalf. You want to cleanse that sin, right? But no, the author here is saying, so you see, he did believe in the resurrection. It's clear he believed in the resurrection. Do you notice how he has to argue that? I mean, look how, let me, I'm going to share my screen again so you can kind of see again. Let's go back here. Again, he said, okay. In doing this, he acted very well and honorably, taking account of the resurrection. For if he were not expecting that those who would follow him would rise again, it would have been superfluous and foolish to pray for the dead. This is an argument. This author's arguing with someone, right? This author is saying, you guys don't think he believed in the resurrection. You don't believe it. I'm telling you, the guys who are on the side of the right side of history believe in resurrection, buddy. And I have proof. This is the proof. There you go. He did right and honorably as someone who believes that everyone's going to get resurrected at the end, as long as they're righteous. Because what he seems to imply here is that if they didn't die in godliness, right, they wouldn't get their reward, right? So it's not clear if they would just be left for dead, they would still be dead, or whether they'd be punished when they came back. He's like, that's why he's got to cleanse the dead. Otherwise, the dead are completely worthless. Why would you do anything for the dead? Right? But he knows they're going to be resurrected and he wants them to get a reward. Right? So that's why he did it. Now, to me, why this is interesting, I see that this doesn't grab other people like it grabs me. But what I think is this shows there's an argument. This shows that during this period, people are arguing about the resurrection. Do you believe in it or do you not believe in it? Do our leaders believe in it? Do they not believe in it? Right? Is this something virtuous to believe in or not? Right? So we see that there's this argument about this idea. Now, if we go to here, if you go to the story of we always call it Chana and her 7 sons. It's not quite the same here, but as each child is killed, they make a little speech, right? So here you have, and frequently they mention resurrection. So you accursed wretch, you dismiss us from this present life, but the King of the universe will raise us up to an everlasting renewal of life because we have died for his laws, right? I got these from heaven, and because of his laws, I disdain them, and from him, I hope to get them back again, right? I'll get my hands back again from God because I'm at his tongue, right? Right. So all of them, they're dying horribly, but they're all like, I'm going to be resurrected. All right. So this is a major part of their kind of martyrdom. Like yes, it seems like we are martyrs, but we know we will be resurrected. I see questions and chat. So just a moment.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So Joel has his hand up.
Yeah. So it's resurrection. It's not the idea of immortality yet, like this immortality of the soul.
It's not clear it isn't clear whether resurrection is like in Daniel, it sounds like there's an element of immortality once you're resurrected, right?
Yeah,
you argue with that, it's metaphorical or whatever, but like it's not clear. It's not clear because again, you're talking about this miraculous end time. Once they're resurrected, it's not clear whether then they live. It sounds like once I would assume that what they're thinking is that once they're resurrected, they live forever because
until the resurrection, they're sleeping.
They're sleeping, or in Enoch, they're in holding pens, right? There's still not a super fleshed out heaven and hell.
Yeah.
Right. And that brings me to Susan Aronoff is asking, why does the idea of resurrection develop and take hold in Second Temple times? And I mentioned this before, that in this period, we're well into this idea of individual consequences for sin. So we see this already in Yechezkel. Yechezkel talks about this, but before Yechezkel, there is this general idea that's generally accepted, sometimes more, sometimes less, that you might pay for previous generation sin, and you will certainly pay for collectively, if there are some sinners, everyone's going to pay if there are enough of them, right? If they sin enough, everyone's going to pay, right? And that absolutely makes sense when everyone's living in the same country, in the same cities. If when the marauding army comes through, you don't get away because you're righteous. Even if you survive, you didn't really get away, right? You suffer. So, but once you have a community in exile, which is what Yechezkel is dealing with. You've got a community in exile, you've got a community in the land of Israel, and they feel tremendously connected to each other. They are not at all different communities, and yet they have different fates, different things can happen to them. And Yechezkel starts talking about, and everyone's already thinking this. I don't know if everyone's thinking this way, but certainly Yechezkel's talking about how, no, you pay for your son sin. Your son does not, your father doesn't. You pay for your own sin, right? And only yours. Now, once you have that idea as a basic understanding of how the world works, which is certainly the way Yechezkel is spreading it out, like the world works this way, not just the nation of Israel, everything works this way. Then you look around and you see a guy who is absolutely the worst, and he's doing well. He's doing well. He has a good life. He dies in his sleep. And you're like, what the heck is this? What is this? He was horrible. He stole money from widows and orphans. He was just the worst. He had a great life though. And this other person who's a lovely person is suffering. When is it all going to be evened out? So you can either have you can have this idea of heaven and hell, right? Where there are people who suffer in this world that we don't see, right? People who suffer and people rewarded in this other world, or they're not, that's a little far yet. They're like, okay, all right, so there's going to be another life where things get evened out. And that other life is going to be enabled through resurrection, right? So you need resurrection to have this opportunity for everything to get evened out. And then we, the righteous, are going to get to see those wicked people be really punished. And we're going to get great stuff. That's when it's going to happen, when everyone is resurrected, or when the righteous people are resurrected and the wicked stay dead, right? So there are different accounts of different resurrection in different places. So so that's kind of this. So that's I wanted to kind of go into this idea of the way resurrection is now. From this point on, it does become much more central, right, in Jewish thought, etc. And again, you can see in Second Maccabees, which almost certainly is post-dating Daniel here, right? Like even if you're like an academic, Second Maccabees is later, right? And there's this argument because the author is saying, see, he had to have believed. He must have believed in resurrection, because if he didn't believe in resurrection, he wouldn't have done that thing. Right? So you can see that there's an actual live argument going on in certain circles, right? It could be that it's going on in perhaps only in diaspora circles or mainly in diaspora circles, not necessarily though. But there's an argument going on about this in this period of, do you believe in resurrection or not? Right? So that's an interesting thing to notice in Second Maccabees. So let's go back to our chapter in Daniel. One more pause for any questions before we go back. Everyone's had enough of resurrection? Okay, let's go back.
Miriam?
Yes?
Maybe I can just add that this issue of the change in the belief in the resurrection can also be seen in the burial methods. Because in the first temple period, when they're buried, they used to put all the bones, after the body decays,
Yeah.
put the bones in a repository.
In an ossuary, right?
No. In the first temple period, they put them in a repository, which is called a Masifa, which is one big cave. So, your bones are going to be with your father's bones mixed together.
Right, I gathered to your father's, right.
Yeah, the Sefer Amav, the Sefer Avotav. And
Yeah.
before that, you have Shechavim Avotav, which is where your body is laying down. And of course, when all the bones are mixed, you cannot really do Tchiat HaMeitim, because, your head is mixed with and
Right,
your
right.
leg
And
is
if
on
you
the
got a
left
whole
side.
pile of everyone's bones, then it's going to be a mess when you're resurrected.
Exactly. So that's why in the second temple period, at the end of it, you can see they change to the ossuary method that you mentioned, and
Oh,
then
nice. Yeah.
each body is buried differently, like separately. And then it's
Separately.
much easier
Right.
to
Right,
resurrect.
that's a good point. Because then, yes, that's thank you. Yeah. So instead of having one big pile of bones, everyone's bones, even though they're kind of collected into a smaller area, they have their own box.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Right. Because you wouldn't want to be resurrected with someone else going through your waist. Right. That would
Exactly.
that would be
Yeah.
embarrassing. So thank you very much, Ido. So thanks.
Although I think I have heard some people believe that even in the days of the first temple, when they had a masefa, there were those who believed that they already back then believed in resurrection, that somehow miraculously the skeletons would snap together in their proper places.
Well, I mean, once you're already being resurrected, I guess, I mean, why not? Right. I mean, well, I mean, it's a little like, so for example, in what Yechezkel describes, it seems to be like just a lot of bones, just a whole place full of bones. Right. But it's, and they're resurrected. But I do like Ido's idea, and I do think it makes sense that if you really believe in resurrection, you kind of want to have your own body in its own place, as opposed to be like, who cares about these bones? Just shove them wherever. Like, not exactly, right? But just put it with his father's bones, just right. As opposed to, if you believe in resurrection, it has more weight, how you keep the bones. Okay, back to our verses. So here we have, so let's continue on. So we have the kind of everyone's going to kind of come back to life. The wicked are going to be punished. The righteous are going to have it seems like some kind of eternal life. That's what it sounds like. And particularly these masculine, these people who were the teachers in this crisis time under Antiochus IV, right? V'ata Daniel, stoma dvarim v'chatoma sefer ad et ketz, yishotetu rabim v'tirbeh hadat. And you, Daniel, close up these words and sign it in the book. I say the book, of course, we need like a scroll, until the time of the end. Many will kind of wander, and knowledge shall be increased. It's not super clear what they mean. Does it mean that wander kind of reading it in the future, and then they'll know? Or are they going to they're going to be wandering and then eventually they'll open it? It's not clear. And I, Daniel, I saw there are two people standing, two essentially angels standing, one on each side of the river. And one said to the person who's wearing linen, the guy who's wearing linen, he's the guy who started the prophecy to begin with, to Daniel, who's apparently Gabriel, right? He's that angel who started the prophecy way back in chapter 10 in Perek Yud. And he says, till when is this is it going to be this end or this period of wonders? And I heard the man who was wearing linen, the guy who was essentially probably the angel Gabriel, who's standing above the waters of the river. And we say the river because it would make sense that it's the Nile here, raising his right and left to heaven. And he swore by the ever-living God, essentially. That for the time, 2 times and a half, right? So it does sound like the 3.5. Remember, we had that 3.5 year period that was supposed to be until the end that we've heard in other prophecies in Daniel. That 3.5 years, 2 years and a half, 3.5 years. When there's an end of the breaking of the hand of the holy nation, in other words, the end of the breaking of the power of the Jewish people, that's when everything's going to be done. In other words, that's when this is going to be over. Vani shamati v'lo avin, and I heard, I didn't understand. V'amra adoni ma harit ele, and I said, sir, what is now? There's possible. It could be, when is this actually going to happen? Right. That's the traditional interpretation. And I think it's not a bad one, actually. What is this actually? What is the actual end of this? I don't get what you're saying. A period and 2 periods and a half. What does it mean? Or what's the end? What's going to actually happen after this? I don't understand what you've been telling me. Vayomer lech Daniel. He says, go, Daniel. Because these things are closed and shut up until the time of the end. In other words, you're not going to understand it. Shut up. Just write it down, close it up, seal it, and it's going to come true. Vani shamati. Sorry. Vayomer lech. We said that. Yitbaru v'yitlamnu v'yitzarfu. Many people will be purified and be kind of whitened, and will be also kind of purified of the dregs, like it's like silver, right? Will be purified. Many will rabin v'yashu. Now again, usually what this means, or frequently what this means, is it means people are going to be lost. People from the righteous group, from the good group, are going to be lost, and that's kind of this purifying thing that they're going to go through. And the wicked people will be wicked, or they will accuse the wicked, and the wicked will not understand. But the wise people, those teaching people, they will understand. Remember, this whole thing's been a prophecy, right? So those people who are the teachers, who are the wise people, who are fighting the good fight, but on a spiritual level, they're going to understand this prophecy when they get it. You, Daniel, you don't understand it yet, but they'll understand, and the wicked people will be wicked. Okay. And from the time that the tamid, the continual sacrifice is taken away, and the disgusting thing is set up, the disgusting thing being an idol set up in the temple, from that time, it's going to be 1,290 days. Now, 1,290 days, say it's around 3.5 years. Okay. Ashrei ha-mechakev yagia. Happy is the one who waits and comes. That's like what we have. That's the famous verse in Habakkuk, right? That you'll wait, right? That we say when we sing, achakelo, that I will wait for him. That's from Habakkuk, and that's what Daniel is echoing now. This idea that happy is the person who waits for this messianic age. It will come. Liyamim 1,335. And now it's a different number. Days 1,335. Slightly more, like 75-day difference. So it's not a big difference, but it's a difference. The academic theory is that, I think Gunkel said this, that what happened was this date came and went, and this hadn't happened yet. So they said, no, it's a little bit beyond that, and they added a new date that was a little bit longer. But you can also say this is a different count from a different point, or to a different point, right? Like you could say it's to the point of the purification of the temple, or to the point of winning a certain battle. Like it's not super clear what, whether these two dates are meant to be something, referring to something else. Vata lech laketz v'tanok v'tamod l'goracha laketz emin. But you go till the end time, and you will rest, and then you will stand to your fate to the end of days. And what this is what is this implying? You're going to rest because you're going to die. You're Daniel. You're not going to live till then, right? You're going to die, and then you'll stand for your fate. Why? Because you're righteous. And we just had a prophecy of a resurrection. So Daniel, don't worry about it. No, you don't get it. People then will understand. They will understand, right? You just die, right? Like you do your thing, then you'll die, and then you'll be resurrected because you're righteous. So you'll be resurrected at the end time, and you'll see this thing come true. All right. Now, again, First Maccabees has it 3 years. It's 3 years from the time of the decrees for the purification of the temple. We've seen 3.5 years in different places in Daniel. It seems to be according to some other count, or because here, it seems pretty clear that they're in the middle of the decrees. It doesn't sound like whoever is writing this is on the happy side of the Maccabean revolt. They're on the side where people are dying, right? Now in Second Maccabees, you have this whole section of martyrdom and people dying like crazy. So like it does now. Second Maccabees, again, it's written from a perspective of outside of Judea. So it's a very different account than First Maccabees, which is really talking about the battles, right? It does like it's very clear what the purpose is in First Maccabees. I don't want to like mislead that it's just about battles, but it's not quite as, oh, look at these people who are simply dying for their faith, and isn't that wonderful, right? It's we have to fight this fight and we have to make sure we survive, right? So, but here we have this idea that there are people in Jerusalem, in Judea, who are teaching. They're teaching, they're telling people what they need to do, and they are losing people. But don't worry. It seems like nothing can stop Antiochus IV. It seems like nothing can stop him, right? And he's going to actually. I want to correct myself in terms of the 3 years. He dies. Antiochus dies actually. 3 years in. So like there's no knowledge of that, right? In these chapters. It's not that Antiochus is going to be tremendously powerful, and this is going to be brought down. Now, I do want to say in our next class, we're going to discuss the traditional interpretation of these prophecies, because the traditional interpretation, of course, doesn't take those last chapters from talking about Antiochus, right? It takes them far, far further, right? So the whole way we were reading Perek Yud Aleph, chapter 11, with it's this historical event and that historical event and this other historical event, it's going to look very different when we're looking through the eyes of Rashi or Ibn Ezra or Saadia. And in our next class, that's what we're going to try to do in the time that we have given. I'm going to try not to make it like, because you could spend like a long time on it, so I will try to keep it. Focused.
Let me get this straight. So in Second Maccabees, Antiochus dies, but the writers are not aware of
First
his
Maccabees, hold on. In First Maccabees, let me see if I have it open to the right place. I probably don't. No, I don't. Just a second. In First Maccabees. So no, it was the purification. Let me show you what we've got here. Okay, so we have here okay. On the 15th day of Kislev, in the 145th year, he constructed an abomination of desolation on the altar in the cities around Yehuda. They built altars and burned incense at the doors of the houses, and the books of the law which they found, they tore up and burned with fire. Remember, this is First Maccabees. Again, I don't mean to say that the first Maccabees is not also a religious book, right? Wherever there was found in someone's possession, the book of the covenant. These are the decrees, right? It's the 15th day of Kislev in the 145th year. All right, and then if we go to here, in the 148th year, in the 25th of the 9th month, this being the month of Kislev, they offered sacrifice according to the law on the new altar of whole burnt offerings that they made. This is when they clean the temple. Okay, so you've got 3 years. It's 3 years. All right, so 3 years between them and them cleaning the temple. So, but it's 3 years. So it's 3 years, right? It's 3 years from the desecration to the cleansing, the desecration and the decrees and the cleansing, right? So, And that's in and it's clear in First Maccabees. You say, well, maybe First Maccabees is wrong, but it's giving you dates. I mean, it seems pretty accurate, but it also seems pretty clear that in Daniel we're talking from a situation of when is this going to end? When is this going to end? It's not ending yet, right? It doesn't. Now, also, honestly, you could say, oh yeah, so it was purified after 3 years. It's purified, but they're still fighting. So, like, you could say the 3.5 years, they could be counting to something else. You know, exactly what kind of things, what kind of service you're having in the temple when part of the city you're still fighting in, right? It could be that it takes another half a year to get it to a point where you can have the regular sacrifices the way they should be. But it does seem to be that the point of view here is a point of view of we're in this horror, we don't see a way out of it. The way out is going to be miraculous. The way out is going to be a miracle, not just a miracle that the Maccabees are going to succeed, a miracle that things that God is just going to have Antiochus fail. That's the miracle. People will be resurrected. Daniel, you're going to see it, right? It's that kind of miraculous ending. Now, you could say, well, okay, so they're looking at that kind of miraculous ending, and then there is this different type of miraculous ending where the Maccabees actually succeed, right? And then everyone's waiting maybe for the other part of the miracle, right? Okay, so we won, he failed. Now where are the trumpeting angels, right? Like where's the, and then that kind of leads into, but then I think we would see more of an immediate reaction. Whereas what seems to happen is as the Hasmoneans become kind of a disappointment to many different types of Jews, there's an expectation on the part of different groups of Jews that there's going to be a Messianic age where things really work correctly, as opposed to the disappointment the Hasmoneans ended up being for many different groups. I know many different groups, for at least some different groups, right? As opposed to an immediate disappointment after the Maccabean victory. So again, so what we see in chapter 12 is an attitude of we're in the middle of this, chapters 11 to 12, we're in the middle of this, good people are dying, great people are dying, they're losing people, they're trying to teach everyone what to do, and people are dying. What is going to bring us out? God will, through a tremendously miraculous age. So in our next class, again, we're going to look at traditional interpretation of these prophecies that don't relate it to like every little historical event in the time of the Seleucids and Ptolemies.
Just one last question, a little bit off topic. The concept of Chanukah being the Sukkot of Kislev, that's in Second Maccabees, right?
Yeah, that's in the introduction to Second Maccabees. That was added, right, by Judeans, right? So in other words, you had Second Maccabees, it's written in Greek. First Maccabees was originally in Hebrew. So you got Second Maccabees in Greek, written with all this, drama and da-da-da. Then it gets an edit. It gets an edit in Judea. This letter at the beginning is added, saying, this is why you keep the Sukkot in Kislev, right? And it's turned into a book that explains Hanukkah. And they add different things in the book itself. Like they add a description of the purification of the temple. They add certain things in the book that to kind of call back to Hanukkah. It was originally written, again, to commemorate the day of Nicanor, which we will celebrate next week, because next week our class will be the night of Yom Nicanor. How fortuitous is that? Isn't that exciting?
Which is Tani Dester.
Yes, it's the night before, yes. But Tani Dester will start in the morning. We can start celebrating the day of Nicanor in the night, right? As one does. So we can still be celebrating. It is cool, right? So Kyla asked, so is this prophecy not fulfilled or not yet fulfilled? So that's the thing. So what you have is right as soon as you move out of the age of Antiochus, it's very clear everyone's interpreting it as not yet fulfilled. People aren't. Josephus, in fact, talks about how Daniel's prophecies are actually about the Romans, etc. Right? So very from immediately, Daniel's prophecies are seen as not yet fulfilled. Right. Okay. Thank you for joining me, everyone. I'll see you next week.